Here's some botched up extra bits. Fries on the side.
What's up? This is the Botched Up podcast on this day for the 11th of January. As always, you have me, Benito, and my good friend Basil.
What a maneuver!
And on this day, we're talking about January the 11th, 1993, the very first episode of Monday Night Raw. I'm going to go through the show very quickly. For such an important show in the world of wrestling, the debut, the inaugural show, if you like, is awful.
I haven't watched this today because this is your on this day.
Yeah.
But because I am a shitty wrestling historian, is this the show with The Undertaker versus Damien Demento on it?
Yes, it is.
Right.
What knowledge?
I have seen this show, I think, once in my life.
You know, I knew you had seen this show because I steal your network, and when I came round to watching the show, it had already been watched.
I think it would be absolutely fascinating to see what has already been watched, and it's probably not the good content.
Probably not. A bit of background information on this show. Basically, ratings were really down in the early 90s. Ticket sales, merchandise, everything was bad, going tits up. But in the sporting world and TV world, live programming was becoming more and more popular. So Vince McMahon did his Vince McMahon-y thing where he decided to bite the bullet, take a risk, much like he did with pay-per-view in the 80s, and said, we're going to do a live show instead of syndicated, pre-taped shows. So that's where Monday Night Raw was born from.
And Raw, I think, I'm not 100% sure because this is in the very deep vaults of my brain. But the term Raw came from their catchphrase, I think, which was something like uncooked, uncut, uncensored. Is that something that they mentioned on the show?
Yeah, I saw a mini... They didn't say that on the show, but I did see a small documentary, and there was a clip of Vince talking about how he wanted to do something different, he wanted to do something live, so it felt like anything could happen, and it just felt raw. And that's where the name comes from.
I love the fact that it's uncooked. Did you see any adverts for Lexapro on this?
Yeah, a few.
Yeah, which was their supplement, I think.
Oh, it's actually theirs. I thought it was just a deal they had.
No, I'm pretty sure they owned it, and there's all of these rumours that just like the Atari video game version of E.T. the Extraterrestrial, millions and millions of cans of Lexapro are buried somewhere in the Arizona desert.
Oh, fantastic. All the shit they couldn't sell.
Yeah.
So obviously we all know it takes place in the Manhattan Center. They became residents of that building throughout the 90s. The reason they chose that building was because they actually wanted Madison Square Garden, but because business was so bad at the time, they just knew they wouldn't be able to sell it out for a weekly 1-hour show. So Manhattan Center is like apparently a 5-minute walk down the road from MSG.
Was this also the show where, or maybe it was a different show, where Bobby Heenan tried to get in attendance? Yeah. This was the show.
So the show opens up on, I can't remember the guy's name, like the lead interviewer at the time.
Michael P. Hayes? Doc Hendricks? Todd Pangel?
Rob Bartlett.
Oh, no idea. Wait, wasn't he?
No, Sean Mooney.
I don't remember him either. Cool.
Okay, so Sean Mooney is this interviewer guy, whatever. So there's about 4 skits throughout the night that he's not letting Bobby the Brain Heenan in because his seat at the commentary desk has been filled by someone else. That someone else being Rob Bartlett, who is a radio DJ just for a local New York radio, and he's also a comedian. This guy is fucking awful. Like at one point during the only decent match of the night, the Shawn Michaels match, he's like parodying Mike Tyson phoning up from jail and talking about it's not fair that he's in jail. And all the time, Vince McMahon is trying to get this guy to shut up in like the nicest professional way.
That's really interesting. It's really interesting to begin with that Mike Tyson was in prison for rape when Raw came to air for the first time, considering he gave them their biggest pay-per-view spike in years later. But also, it's interesting that you said that, was it Sean Mooney was a local radio DJ?
No, sorry, Sean Mooney is the interviewer. The DJ is Rob Bartlett.
Okay, and he was announcer for a night?
Well, apparently he lasted for 2.5 months, but he knew nothing about wrestling, so he just didn't get over.
I find that really interesting because Todd Pettingale also came from local radio broadcasting. So at this point, I think they were looking through the Manhattan crowd on radio, and I think their ratings were so low that they were relying on local radio celebrities to popularize WWF Raw shows so that they could sell tickets.
Yeah, and it being a live show, not pre-taped, it means that they need to try and get a crowd in there week in, week out.
But yeah, and isn't that fucking fascinating that at that point they were so low that they were hiring radio DJs in Manhattan to sell tickets to the shows?
Yeah, because
WWE.
Because obviously those guys are gonna like help market it in the local area. An interesting fun fact is that apparently, well, it's theatre anyway, but apparently it was so difficult to get the ring into the Manhattan Center, into the theatre that they used. They would have to take the ring in bit by bit up a 5x5 foot square elevator, and
I've never heard that before.
Apparently, it took the ring crew like up to 5 hours just to get the ring in the building. Never mind setting it up. Yeah, like every Monday doing that, taking it in, taking it out. Can you imagine the ball ache?
You always find facts that I've never heard before. Every time I think I know something, you come up with something that I couldn't even comprehend finding out. That's amazing.
That's crazy. You think like doing that for a couple of weeks to be like, oh fuck it, let's find a different arena.
So take me through this card because I'm pretty sure I had like because I was like a fucking obsessed collector when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I had a 15th anniversary of Raw DVD set. And I think I bought like the special European edition with the first episode of Raw on it. And I think that's the first time I watched this show. And I remember vaguely, I definitely remember the main event. And I remember vaguely a halfway decent Shawn Michaels match with somebody.
Yeah, that's the only decent match. So let's go through this.
Yeah.
We open up on Yokozuna versus Koko Beware. Match lasts 3 minutes. Koko Beware gets like 2 chops in. Yokozuna absolutely just demolishes him, which is fine. It's fair because Yokozuna goes on to win the Rumble this year. He's in the main event of Mania. Like, they're pushing him massive, but the first ever live Raw, maybe you should have put a decent match on for the very first match.
That's the thing that's the thing that always struck me with this show, right? You've got a Raw debut, the first, and your main event is Damien Demento. Like that never made a single shred of sense to me whatsoever. But then if you look at the roster in 1993, where do you even really go? And I do believe that it's a fair comparison at this point that WWE's creative in 1993 to 1995 is reaching the levels of WWE 2020 to 21's creative. And I don't think that's an overstatement. I think at this point in time, this is the second worst, if not the worst, creative period in WWE history.
Well, they're lost in the 80s yet. They're still yet to come into the 90s.
Yeah.
I think. The second match on the card is the Steiner brothers. No one on commentary seems to know, just a bit like me, seems to know which one's Rick and which one's Scott. Even Vince McMahon gets it wrong once. Versus the Executioners. Also on commentary is Macho Man. He hasn't got a fucking idea what's going on.
Oh, Macho Man was
most of the
Macho Man
anyway.
was the worst on commentary, man.
But he has the hype. He just has no idea what's going on. Versus the Executioners, which I think are a jobber tag team, and the stuff. Rick looks like he actually wants to kill these guys. At one point, he does like an inverted suplex, throwing the guy into the turnbuckles, which I don't think was a regular move back in the early 90s.
That's just the Steiners, bro.
Like we see nowadays.
It doesn't matter what company they're in.
He was out to fuck him up.
Yeah.
Third match, right. So here's why I think you think the main event's a bit weird. The third match is the only match that goes over 3 minutes. We have a 10-minute match. Shawn Michaels defeats Max Moon. You know Max Moon?
Max Moon,
the guy in the weird costume.
Max Moon was like a space costume, and he had like wires hanging from his head. I'm pretty sure Conan. That was Conan.
Well, it was originally Conan, but he quit because he got popular in Mexico, and then it was a different guy. who I can't remember the name of.
So who was? Do you know who was this Max Moon?
This wasn't Conan. This was the other guy.
Ah, okay.
Anyway, so this was a halfway decent match, and I believe this is me making it up. I haven't read this anywhere, but I believe if they truly were live, they thought they were going to run too long, and this was meant to be the main event, and then they ran slightly under, and then they had to put the Taker match on in the main event spot.
I mean, I can see it, I can believe it, but at the same time, isn't Max Moon a staple of 1993 WWE booking? Like, even if it is the main event and it is a halfway decent match, you're putting Max Moon out there. Because in the context of WWE in 1993, Max Moon lasted a little bit longer, I think, but Max Moon and Damien Demento were characters that at max lasted 3 to 6 months. I think Damien Demento lasted maybe 1 or 2, and Damien Demento's gimmick was created as a rib. It was a rib gimmick because the guy had heat backstage. Baffles me, like, why you would do that sort of stuff on the debut Raw. You would have surely Bret Hart in the main event.
Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels.
Yeah,
cool. Why not?
No, but like before the beef, before all of the drama, Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels, those were the two guys that you had that were the biggest sort of deals in 1993, really. It should have 100% been those two in the main event. Or at least Shawn Michaels versus
Absolutely.
The Undertaker. Or something like that.
That would be great, wouldn't it? So, like you mentioned, Undertaker versus Damien Demento, but that's not actually the true main event. The main event spot is an interview segment with our boy, Doink the Clown.
What? Wait, is this at the end of the show?
At the end, so it's basically for the entire show, Doink has just been doing his pranks in the crowd. To be honest, completely ruined the show because he's taken all the attention away from these 3-minute squash matches. So eventually Vince McMahon is like, fuck it, I'm going to go talk to Doink, who's ringside being a prat. And he goes up to him and he's saying, hey, Crush said that if you continue doing these pranks, Crush is going to come and beat you up because he's pissed off with you. And he's like, oh, if Crush comes out here, then he won't be laughing. Crush comes out, and this is the moment they set up their WrestleMania match. And then when the show finishes, the dark match is Crush versus Bam Bam Bigelow. So the only reason that interview segment existed was to have Crush do his entrance out to the arena. So again, maybe Crush versus Bam Bam Bigelow was meant to be the main event, but they ran out of time.
I'm actually pretty amazed that I know we did a whole podcast on Doink the Clown. I didn't realise that Doink was already there as early as this. On the first episode of Raw, I didn't realise that I thought his character was created like maybe a month later.
This was back when they were just doing all those like stupid bits on Superstars and stuff where he wasn't actually having matches, he was just there. And he wasn't even an official wrestler, he was just there being a tit in the crowd.
Out of interest, how long did The Undertaker versus Damien Demento go?
2 minutes and 26 seconds. So they lock up. Damien Demento's got the weirdest haircut, by the way.
Yeah, it's like half shaved and then a bit raveny, right?
But it's all the way shaved until right at the back of his head, and then it just goes down in a weird U shape.
I remember that guy.
Then Undertaker just throws a couple of punches. They go out to the outside. He drops him on the steel steps. Then they go back into the ring, and it's over.
Cool. The nice moment in wrestling history. I'm actually really glad that you talked about this show because I think I have thinking after you've told me the results, I've seen it at least twice.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's obviously
they spent more time talking about the upcoming Royal Rumble pay-per-view in 2 weeks than they did having actual wrestling matches.
Do you know off the top of your head what was the Royal Rumble main event card?
I know Yokozuna wins it.
Well, I think, I don't 100% quote me, but I think that it had a really, really underrated gem of a match, Bret Hart versus Scott Hall, Razor Ramon.
Yep, they built up that Razor Ramon had an interview segment on this Raw, and he's got a weird like Cuban accent at this point.
Yeah, because that was the original where it was like proper based on Scarface, but they had a little gem of a match which I'd recommend anybody to go check out.
Bret Hart beats Razor Ramon by submission in 18 minutes for the World's Heavyweight Championship.
One of the better matches of that generation of wrestling in WWE.
And Shawn Michaels versus Marty Jannetty, they built that up on this show as well.
So this was shortly after the barbershop window thing.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, there you go. So that's your On This Day, the first ever Raw.
I enjoyed that, Ben. I think that was the best On This Day that's ever been done, and it was done by you.
No, it's not. Don't do that. On This Day,
Well, it might be a Damien Demento thing. Yeah.
So anyway, the rest of this week, we're going to do our predictions for 2021, what we think is going to happen in the wrestling world. And then the pod this Friday is the best and worst botchy awards. So until then, keep it botched up, brother.
Like, share, and subscribe to keep it botched up, brother.